March 5, 1943. Somewhere above the gray clouds of the Ruhr Valley, Messerschmitt Bf 109 Pilot, Lieutenant Karl. Reiner squints through the frost on his canopy and chuckles over the radio. There it is again. Der fliegende Ziegelstein, the flying brick. Below him, a dull olive-green P-47 Thunderbolt lumbers across the horizon, engine coughing, wingtips shuddering in the cold. Look at it, too fat to fight, too slow to flee. Laughter crackles over the Luftwaffe channel. They roll their sleek fighters to dive. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, and every week we uncover the stories the world forgot. What Reiner didn't know, what no one in the German high command yet understood, was that this brick would soon shatter their skies. The mockery that echoed through Luftwaffe hangars would, within a year, turn to stunned silence. Because America's flying brick was about to become the storm that no Messerschmitt could outrun. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was never born to be elegant. It was born to survive. Under its slab-like armor plate and barrel-bodied frame throbbed a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double-wasp radial engine, 2,000 horsepower of roaring, oil-slicked fury. Its four-bladed Curtiss electric propeller sliced the air at more than 2,700 revolutions per minute. 8 Browning 50 caliber M2 machine guns lined its wings, spitting a wall of lead at 13 rounds per second each. Together they could tear through a locomotive or a Focke-Wulf in less than 3 seconds of sustained fire. From 30,000 feet it could dive at 80 miles per hour, faster than anything, in the sky in 1943. The Germans called it impossible. The Americans called it momentum. Engineers called it energy fighting. The P-47 was too heavy to dogfight in circles, but it could climb high, swoop down in a screaming dive, release its thunder, and vanish upward before the enemy could even pull the trigger. In the early days, however, that theory looked like fantasy. Pilots training at Bradley Field and Farmingdale lost dozens of Thunderbolts to flameouts, stalls, and electrical failures. "She'll kill you if you treat her like a Spitfire," one instructor warned. The turbo supercharger designed to squeeze oxygen into the engine at altitude often jammed or burst into sparks. Ground crews joked that the P-47 had more plumbing than a Brooklyn apartment. But doctrine, like steel, is forged in failure. Out of those early wrecks came a brutal discipline. American instructors drilled new pilots to fly the Jug, as it became affectionately known, with patience and precision. "Respect her weight," Major Frank Klibbe said. "Ride the dive, not the turn. You're not dancing, you're striking." The Thunderbolt's size was its shield, its power, its vengeance. In the hands of men who understood her language, the P-47 became a hammer in the sky. The first proof came in blood. April 8, 1943. Lieutenant Jean Martin of the 4th Fighter Group was returning from an escort mission over France when 3 Bf-109s fell on his tail near Rouen. His radio was dead, his flight scattered by cloud. He could see tracer lines snaking past his canopy, the Messerschmitts gaining. Martin did what no pilot was trained to do. He dove straight down, full throttle. The airspeed indicator spun past 450, then 475. The canopy rattled like a drum. The Thunderbolt's wings flexed under the strain. The Germans broke off, thinking he'd tear himself apart. But when Martin pulled out over the channel, the brick held together. He landed with holes in the fuselage, but alive. His wingmen started calling it the tank that flies. That legend spread faster than the propaganda that mocked it. Summer 1943 saw the P-47 enter the European theater in force. 8th Air Force squadrons painted red, yellow, and blue cowls around their engines. Rainbow noses the Germans would come to fear. But at first, the Thunderbolt's short legs kept it close to home. Its combat range was barely 200 miles. Bomber crews joked bitterly that their escorts turned for England while we turned for hell. Then came Schweinfurt, August 17, 1943, 230 B-17s lumbered toward the ball bearing, factories of southern Germany escorted by P-47s only as far as Eupen. After that, they were on their own. When the Thunderbolts turned back, German interceptors fell upon the bombers in waves. 60 B-17s didn't return. The message was brutal and clear. A fighter that couldn't stay the whole way was a fighter that might as well not exist. American engineers got to work. They added drop tanks, 75-gallon steel bellies slung beneath the fuselage, later boosted to 108 gallons. Pilots called them peanut tanks. Combined with smarter fuel management, these tanks stretched the Thunderbolt's range deep into Germany. The flying brick was learning to cross oceans of fire. But the real transformation wasn't just in hardware, it was in heart. At Duxford, Colonel Hubert Hub Zemke of the 56th Fighter Group reshaped everything. He trained his men to use altitude as a weapon, to think like predators, not prey. "You own the vertical," he barked. "Dive, shoot, and climb. Never turn with a Hun." His squadrons, Zemke's Wolf Pack, became the testing ground for the Thunderbolt's doctrine. By autumn, the Luftwaffe began to notice something new. The big American machines didn't run anymore. They hunted. Vignette number 1 burned that truth into the enemy's eyes. October 14, 1943, Black Thursday. The second Schweinfurt raid. 42 Thunderbolts screamed through flak clouds at 28,000 feet. One pilot, Captain Robert S. Johnson, found himself isolated as 20 Focke-Wulfs fell on him from above. Cannon shells ripped his canopy. Oil blinded his vision. He was hit 12 times. A 20-milo round shattered his armor glass. The cockpit filled with smoke. But Johnson refused to bail. He pushed the throttle forward and dove, firing blindly. The Focke-Wulfs followed, spitting shells until their guns ran dry. When they finally pulled off, thinking the jug was finished, Johnson leveled out and limped home over the channel. Engine still roaring, blood on his hands, bullet holes in every panel. Ground crews counted 21 cannon hits and 200 machine gun strikes. None had penetrated the cockpit. "She brought me home," Johnson muttered. "The jug takes care of her own." That single sortie turned the flying brick into a legend. Then came vengeance. In early 1944, with drop tanks and new tactics, the Thunderbolts swept deeper into Germany. At Kassel, at Frankfurt, at Hamm, the Luftwaffe met a storm they couldn't comprehend. The P-47s dove from the sun, unleashing 8 streams of 50 caliber fire that converged into a lethal kill zone at 300 yards. Focke-Wulfs disintegrated in midair. "It was like being hit by 1,000 hammers," a captured pilot later said. "We thought they were too heavy to fight. We were wrong." The Germans began to whisper about the Thunderbolt Wall. Any bomber formation guarded by them became nearly untouchable. From offense to defense, the balance shifted. But even as it conquered the air, the jug's evolution had only begun. Engineers at Republic Aviation fitted a new paddle blade propeller to harness the R-2800's full power. The P-47D model could now climb faster, dive steeper, and reach 433 miles per hour at altitude. The roar of that engine, deep and thunderous, earned it the nickname Juggernaut. Pilots said you could hear a Thunderbolt coming 10 miles away. With new range tanks, they pushed into the heart of Germany, over Leipzig, over Berlin itself. American command finally had a fighter that could go the distance with the bombers, tear apart anything that challenged them, and return home intact. The German pilots stopped laughing, but for every aerial victory, the ground war demanded more. By spring 1944, the P-47 found a second life below the clouds. Its rugged airframe and thick skin made it perfect for ground attack. Armed with 500-pound bombs and high-velocity rockets, the flying brick became the sledgehammer of the Allied advance. Fields of tanks, columns of trucks, locomotives all fell under its thunder. "We used to call in the jugs when we wanted the earth to shake," an American infantryman remembered. Still, it hadn't yet faced the enemy's best, the final test of the skies. That storm was waiting beyond the horizon. Before that day arrived, the Thunderbolt had to be perfected, refined into something faster, deadlier, more untouchable. The coming months would see its greatest metamorphosis. Late spring 1944, the roar of the Thunderbolt changed. The new Curtiss paddle blade propeller bit the air like a saw through steel. The tone dropped from a mechanical whine to a deep rolling thunder that echoed through the valleys of occupied France. Mechanics called it the growl. Pilots said it felt like riding a charging bull. The D-25 and D-28 models of the P-47 now had water injection systems that boosted the R-2800 to nearly 2,300 horsepower for short bursts, enough to climb like an angel and dive like a meteor, and with that came a new doctrine: total control of the sky. In the summer of 1944, American flight schools became factories of precision. Each pilot logged more than 300 hours before combat, trained in gunnery, formation, and survival. They learned to trust the ruggedness of the Jug. "You take a hit," one instructor told his students, "and you'll still get home. So keep your finger on the trigger until the tracers disappear." The tactics born from this training changed the air war. Thunderbolts would climb high above the bombers, then fall like thunderclaps upon interceptors. By June, the P-47 had grown teeth sharp enough to defend D-Day, June 6, 1944, dawn over Normandy. The first waves of Allied ships stretched to the horizon, their decks bristling with landing craft and soldiers. Overhead, hundreds of Thunderbolts circled like hawks. They dove upon German gun positions, tearing through flak batteries with rockets and machine gun bursts. Each dive screamed like vengeance. One pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Laughlin, led his flight down to 100 feet, destroying a German convoy outside Carentan. He later wrote, "We flew through a world of dust and smoke. The Jug never faltered. The Luftwaffe barely appeared that day. Its once proud fighter wings were shadows of their former selves, drained by months of relentless American air superiority." When German pilots did rise to meet them, they found not fat targets but hunters waiting in the clouds, and still, the Thunderbolt evolved. New variants arrived almost monthly. Bubble canopies for 360-degree visibility, strengthened wings for heavier bombs, rocket racks that turned it into a flying artillery piece. By the P-47 D-40, it could carry 2,500 pounds of ordnance, more than some medium bombers. Engineers fitted field kits with rocket tubes, nicknamed bazookas. A single salvo could crack open a Tiger tank. On the front lines, GIs started calling the Thunderbolt the Angel of Death and the best friend a grunt ever had. When the sky thundered, they knew someone upstairs was on their side. By autumn 1944, the P-47's reach had grown almost mythical. Drop tanks stretched its wings across all of Germany, and refueling fields in liberated France turned it into a nomadic predator. Thunderbolts swept low over highways, rail yards, and airfields, hunting locomotives, convoys, and anything that moved. The Germans learned to hide only at night, but even darkness offered no safety for long. Allied radar networks, code-breaking, and forward observation posts built an invisible web over Europe. Each time a Luftwaffe squadron scrambled, radio operators tracked its movement. The Thunderbolts would already be climbing before the Germans even reached cruising altitude. "They were always there," a captured pilot later recalled. "It was as if the Americans could see through clouds." Enemy respect came quietly, first in disbelief, then in awe. Major Heinrich Ehrler, an ace with over 150 kills, wrote in his diary, "The new Thunderbolt is not the same aircraft we mocked. Its power in the dive is terrifying. Even the 190 cannot follow it." Another pilot, interrogated after the war, admitted, "We could outturn them, yes, but we never got the chance. They appeared from nowhere, struck like lightning, and vanished upward. To fight them was suicide." That grudging respect turned to fear when they saw what America could build. In 1944 alone, Republic Aviation produced more than 5,000 Thunderbolts. Across the U.S., assembly lines in New York, Indiana, and Connecticut poured out aircraft faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down. By 1945, the total would reach over 15,000 units, each one a flying fortress of aluminum and fire. Every 48 hours, a destroyed Thunderbolt could be replaced. Every 48 days, a new class of pilots could be trained, armed, and flown to the front. The United States had turned the science of survival into an industry of victory. The Germans, meanwhile, were starving for resources. Factories bombed to rubble, fuel stocks dwindling, and pilots dying faster than they could be replaced. The Luftwaffe's elite, the Experten, were being hunted out of existence. And then came the final boss, the jet age. By late 1944, the Messerschmitt Me-262 entered the war, the world's first operational jet fighter. With a top speed of 540 mph, it was faster than anything the Allies could field. In Berlin briefings, German officers smirked. "Now we will teach the Americans to fear the sky again." But the Thunderbolt had one more trick left in its steel skin. The Me-262 was fast, but fragile. It needed long, smooth runways and time to spool up its engines. During takeoff and landing, it was vulnerable. Allied intelligence spread that weakness quickly. Zemke's Wolf Pack and the 78th Fighter Group were assigned a new mission: Hunt the jets on the ground. March 30th, 1945. German airfield near Akmar. 20 P-47s approached at treetop level, radar-guided and silent. The first pilot spotted two Me-262s taxiing for takeoff. "Let's nail them before they fly," he radioed. The Thunderbolts unleashed a storm. Rockets, 50-caliber tracers, and 500-pound bombs turning the airstrip into an inferno. Both jets were destroyed before leaving the ground. When German officers inspected the cratered field, they found fragments of a drop tank with a hand-painted message. From the flying brick. The Americans had closed the circle. The machine once laughed at for being too slow had just outrun history itself. In the last months of the war, Thunderbolts became omnipresent. They guarded bombers, strafed railways, obliterated armored divisions, and even intercepted V-1 flying bombs. Pilots of the 56th Group downed over 1,000 enemy aircraft while suffering minimal losses. The kill ratio climbed above 4-1. Some squadrons reached 5-1, and yet, for all its violence, the Jug's legacy was not destruction. It was dominance through endurance. In one sortie over the Ardennes, Captain Oscar Perdomo downed 5 enemy planes in a single day, earning the title Last Ace of the War. His weapon? The same P-47D that had first been mocked as clumsy and slow. By the end of the conflict, the Thunderbolt had flown more than 750,000 sorties across Europe and the Pacific, dropped 132,000 tons of bombs, and fired over 135 million rounds of ammunition. More than 3,700 enemy aircraft were confirmed destroyed in the air, and tens of thousands of ground targets turned to twisted steel. It wasn't the sleekest. It wasn't the most graceful, but it was the most relentless. When Germany finally collapsed in May 1945, the skies above Europe belonged entirely to the Jug. The Luftwaffe was broken, its once feared squadrons grounded, its pilots surrendering by the hundreds. One captured German officer summed it up with quiet disbelief. "We used to laugh when we saw them. Now when we heard that thunder, we ran for cover." In the Pacific, the P-47 carried the same vengeance to Japan. With extended range and new bomb loads, it hammered airfields from Saipan to Okinawa. Pilots spoke of seeing the entire horizon glow orange from the fires their rockets started. The flying brick had become a comet of victory. Then came the ultimate proof, the operation that silenced every critic who ever mocked the Thunderbolt. April 7, 1945. Operation Clarion. More than 1,500 Thunderbolts took to the sky alongside Mustangs and Lightnings, attacking every railway, truck, and bridge left in Germany. In 24 hours, the country's entire transport network was paralyzed, thousands of vehicles destroyed, hundreds of locomotives reduced to molten wrecks. German commanders radioed frantic messages to Berlin. "The roads burn. The skies thunder. We cannot move." After one sortie, a ground crew chief met his pilot beside the smoking wreckage of a strafed convoy. "Think they'll rebuild that?" he asked. The pilot grinned, wiping soot from his flight jacket. "Doesn't matter. We'll just come back tomorrow." That was America's real weapon, momentum. The Thunderbolt didn't just win fights. It broke the enemy's spirit. As the war drew to its close, the once battered flying brick stood as the symbol of what American industry and courage could build. It wasn't elegant, but it was unstoppable. When the Luftwaffe's remaining pilots saw those massive silhouettes glinting in the sunlight, they knew the battle was already lost. The scoreboard at the war's end read like prophecy. Over 15,600 Thunderbolts built, more than 800 enemy aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat by Zemke's Wolfpack alone, nearly 500,000 combat sorties flown, bombs, rockets, and bullets, delivered with machine precision, and a combat survival rate that defied belief. Nearly 9 out of 10 pilots who took a P-47 into battle came home. In the hangars of post-war Europe, German engineers walked among the captured machines. One of them, Ernst Heinkel, ran his hand along the bullet-scarred fuselage of a Thunderbolt and murmured, "This is what happens when a nation builds without fear of losing." Years later, historians would call the Thunderbolt the hammer of the 8th Air Force. But to the men who flew her, she was simply the Jug, the friend that roared, the beast that bled, the fortress that flew. Today, if you walk into a museum in Dayton or Duxford, you can still stand beneath one. The metal skin gleams under quiet lights, its nose tilted proudly upward. You can almost hear it. The faint rumble of that double Wasp engine echoing through decades. The smell of oil and dust still clings to the rivets. A small sign on the wall reads, Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Jug. The plane they laughed at. The plane that won the sky. Somewhere, in an old German diary, a final note remains. We thought it was a brick. It was thunder. And that's the legacy. Thunder in steel, thunder in courage, thunder in freedom's name. If you love untold stories from history's darkest hours, subscribe and join us on the next mission through time.